Sayu gets a lot of hate for no reason. Every single guide I see for a character where Sayu is listed as a potential support, you just see Jean but worse. And that's really not what Sayu's about. Sure, they're both animal healers that have an initial party-wide burst of healing, followed by regen, and also have a passive that lets them do party-wide healing outside of their bursts. And yes, Sayu does fit in most of Jean's teams, but that's really where the similarities end. Most people would pick Jean over Sayu for her other utilities, like her cleanse and her fall damage abuse. But I'm going to be brutally honest and say they aren't really that great anyways. Cleanses are only really relevant when there's a negative leyline effect, and I'm not even going to pretend that fall damage abuse is consistent. Not only does it cost stamina for some reason, but miHoYo also added enemies that will try and avoid fall damage entirely. Besides, if Jean's fall damage tech is a net positive for your team's damage, you probably need a better team anyways. But the Jean versus Sayu debate isn't the main focus of this video. Sayu shouldn't be compared to Jean, they really aren't that similar, and that's because Sayu's main strength is that she primarily deals animo damage instead of physical. The advantage of animo damage being the Swirl reaction, an AoE reaction that creates reactions from reactions. The most famous example of this is Sukokumon, where it takes the Electrocharge and Vaporize and adds Pyro Swirl to get additional overload procs. And since the damage from Swirl is almost entirely reaction based, you can skip the very expensive talent grind and opt for leveling the character to 90 with a full EM build, since levels contribute the most to transformative reactions. Swirl being an AoE reaction can also overlap with another Swirl reaction, effectively dealing double damage. This is because the target will take their own Swirl damage as well as the Swirl damage of anyone else nearby. But keep in mind, Swirl damage is capped at 2 damage instances, so you can't really just swirl 12 enemies together and kill them all in one hit. So when you think about Sayu, think sucrose, but instead of buffing her team's damage with elemental mastery, she heals her team while dealing damage, and is easier to play. Sucrose is very squishy with the second lowest HP in the game, and a lot of her teams don't have a healer or a shielder. Sayu teams don't have that problem, as she is both the healer and the on-field carry. And since she doesn't use normal attacks to do this, their supports don't overlap that much, so instead of Beidou, consider Fischl, Raiden, or Lisa. For Cryo, you have Kaya, and while xiangling is pretty good for Sayu, it is also possible to use Bennett and Xinyan thanks to Sayu abusing elemental absorption. But there is one small problem. As you may have noticed, Sayu doesn't deal her damage primarily via normal attacks, so she can't properly utilize Xingqiu for Hydro, and Kokomi and Momona don't exactly cater to Sayu's highly mobile playstyle. So her sole Hydro support is Barbara. Now I know how you feel about 2 healers in the same team, it seems redundant, but Barbara is not here to heal. She can hold the 4-piece instructor set, which buffs your team's elemental mastery. Now this set only works on field, but this isn't a big issue since you want to use her E plus a charge attack to cleanse off the other elements on the enemy. That way Sayu gets Hydro Absorption. The other way of getting Hydro Absorption is to wait for Barbara's healing ticks, but this is obviously a damage loss since you're waiting to deal damage. This is literally the only way she can enable an Electrocharge team or an Overvape team on field, so it's much easier to run her in mono element teams or teams that don't involve Hydro reactions like Overload or more commonly Melt teams. But the thing is, Sayu doesn't need to stay on field to do her job, so you can have another character do the normal attacks for characters like Xingqiu or Beidou and still get the benefit of the additional reaction Swirl creates. This is perfect for characters that don't have AoE but really need it like Yoimiya that would benefit from the increased reaction count, making Sayu a very flexible sub DPS. And of course she's healing the whole team while dealing damage. Now let's talk about healing. Sayu is the best 4-star healer, no contest. We all know Bennett heals fast, but he doesn't heal you past 70% HP, and technically neither does Sayu, but that's not really true because of her Essential 1 passive that heals her whole party when she does a Swirl reaction, burst included. So healing a character to full isn't really an issue. The TLDR is her burst is locked to 1 action at C0, and it has priorities, but because of Sayu's Essential 1 passive, regardless of what action it picks, it's still healing you. But I'm not going to make claims. I'm actually going to prove it. I'm going to use my Zhongli with 46k HP as our test dummy, and he will have a happy little accident and be revived with Delicious Steak, which means he will start at 150 HP for each test. All characters are going to have level 8 talents, except for Barbara, who is only level 70, but her talents are level 9 due to Constellations, and she also has a 60 out of 70 Thrilling Tales. Now with the help of the Genshin Optimizer, I found the mathematical best builds for healing with my current array of artifacts. This is what I'm going to be using for the attack healers, and this is what I'm going to be using for the HP healers. The only 2 defense healers are C4 Goro and Noelle, but I'm going to skip Goro since he can't heal outside of Constellations, and and talk about Noelle later. First, we're gonna start with Jean. Even though this is supposed to be a comparison between the 4 stars, Jean is just here for reference. With our calculator optimized build, Jean heals for a little over 19k on the initial burst and 1.9k per tick after that, which means that our Jean heals for a total of 36k. Next, we will take a look at her sister, Barbara. Barbara's burst heals for about 16k, and while spamming normal attacks during the entire duration of her E, that gives us almost 23k healing, giving our Barbara a total of 39k healing. But we're not done yet. During the recording, I remember that Barbara gets 4 times healing from her E when she uses charge attacks. So with that in mind, I did the test again, using charge attacks as often as I could, and using normal attacks when I was out of stamina, which increased the healing on her E from almost 23k to 26k, giving Barbara a total of almost 43k healing with charge attacks. Next is Diona, using the same optimized build as Barbara. Now notably, she can get more healing if we were to use recurve bow, but I decided not to run it because it's simply not practical to use. Now Diona's burst heals for about 4.6k per tick, but as you notice, the ticks are actually quite slow, so it only heals for about 29k. Luckily, Diona is a better shielder than she is a healer. And finally, we have Sayu. And with the exact same artifacts Jean was using, her initial burst heals for 6.4k, followed by healing 5.5k per tick after that. This will heal our xianglings for a total of 45k. And we got all that healing without an attack percent weapon. So let's do the test again, but with a level 80 free-to-play weapon, just like Jean. However, if my Sayu's healing increases, she's going to overheal my xianglings. So for the next test, he's going to eat the new food that increases your max HP. So instead of 46k max HP, he has 49k max HP. However, this also increases his starting HP from 150 to 161. So I'm going to take note of this in the calculations. With that out of the way, Sayu's initial burst now heals for 6.8k, nearly 7k, with the rest of the burst healing for 5.9k per tick, which brings Sayu's total healing up to 48k. And of course, there's Bennett. With the healing optimized build, he heals for 7.3k per tick, but he stops healing you above 70% HP, and you probably won't be running a build like this on him anyways, so instead I'm going to run a more realistic build on him. And with this build, his healing ticks will only heal for 5.5k, which still heals our xianglings pretty fast. And last, we have Noelle. Now there are 2 problems. 1, I don't have my Noelle leveled, and 2, Noelle's healing drastically changes depending on if you have constellations or not. But both of these problems can be solved by using the Genshin optimizer and a little bit of math. We can simulate the healing of a level 80 Noelle at talent level 8 with a level 90 white blind. With my current artifacts, she'll be able to heal 1.5k per tick, and with her charge attack, it hits about twice per second for a total of 10 or 11 hits depending on hit lag. Interesting enough though, the initial hits on her E and burst will also trigger healing, giving us a total of 13 hits. So we can just multiply the healing number we get from the Genshin optimizer, and we get a total of 20k healing from a single charge attack. However, Noelle still has some leftover stamina, and we can use that to get another charge attack off. And this is when I discovered it's better to use your E after your Q if you plan on using more than one charge attack. So we get the first heal from the initial hit of your E, followed by 10 hits from the first charge attack, and 9 hits from the second charge attack before the shield's duration ends, giving us a total of 20 hits, which gives us about 30k healing. Now, how we get the C0 number is we multiply this number by 0.54, since Noelle by default has a 54% chance to heal. So at C0, we get a little over 16k healing from Noelle. Now, you're probably wondering, if your character is already fully healed, what are you going to do with that leftover healing? And the answer is use that leftover healing to tank damage. The content nowadays favors heavy sustained damage and forcing you into awkward positions over upfront damage, which is where burst healing really falls flat. But wait, there's more. Sayu is yet another character that buffs xianglings. Depending on the direction you spin, you can get additional hits off of xianglings pyronado, on top of already shredding resistances with the viridescent set. Sayu's builds are just as flexible as she is, whether it's an enabler, a sub DPS, or support. The viridescent set is the uncontested best set when it comes to increasing Sayu's personal damage, as well as the best support set she can run overall. But if you're running Sayu in your Zhao double Geo teams, then Noblesse will be ideal. The clam set and the main set aren't worth running on her at all. If you want damage, then full EM would be best, but if you want a pure healing build, attack Sands, attack Goblet, and healing bonus Circlet. With EM or ER substats would be best. But again, you still want to be running the viridescent set just because its utility is too good to pass up. And even after all that said, the the crit build doesn't do bad damage. As far as weapons go, Sacrificial Greatsword is her best in the slot right now because it increases her animal application. The more rolls, the better. If you want Sayu to be a heal bot or a sub DPS that spams her burst off cooldown, then I would recommend her signature weapon. Now the energy loss may seem like a downside, but the perk is actually quite powerful, as it gives you the energy regen on top of particles that you get from your elemental skill, and the energy gain over time is about the same as the extra elemental skill damage you get from the weapon, which is about 2 to 3 particles worth at R1. The advantage it has over running Favonius is that it's consistent and you don't need to build for crit rate. Also, if you proc the passive after you use your burst, you still get the energy regen without it taking 3 energy. If you want to increase your team's damage even further, there are 2 options, but unfortunately they are both 5-star weapons: Wolf's Gravestone and Song of Broken Pines. Wolf's Gravestone buffs your team's attack by 40% when hitting a low health enemy. It's not as strong or as cheap as Thrilling Tales, but at least it's a stat that Sayu actually wants. Song of Broken Pines, on the other hand, buffs your team's attack by 20% and attack speed by 12%. The attack speed bonus being ideal for Yoimi official teams. It's just a shame that Sayu can't really make a good use of the main stat. Her best constellation is C1. It's not a healing improvement, but rather a damage improvement that enables the sub DPS playstyle. So overall, I don't understand how anyone could think Sayu is a bad unit. I feel a lot of people dismiss her because clearly 5-star better than 4-star. But Genshin isn't that simple. We've seen this time and time again with characters like Bennett, Xiangling, Yanfei, so on and so forth. And just because they're a 4-star unit doesn't automatically make them worse than the 5-star unit, especially if you're free to play or a low spender. Sayu is a great unit that heals a lot as well as does damage of her own. Being an animal character, she can enable a ton of reactions and use the VV set for utility, as well as she also does primarily sustained healing instead of burst healing. The advantage being that you can switch your weapons or your stat around to make the character feel better and not necessarily destroy your healing output. But with that said, I'm not saying Sayu is a perfect character without downsides. For example, her completely useless and unnecessary Ascension 4 passive that only functions in co-op. But Sayu is not a gene clone. That is a bad, under-researched take, and you're probably going to see a whole lot more of Sayu when we actually get some more Hydro sub DPS characters other than Xingqiu. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I made this video because I was so confused why people don't like or don't use Sayu when there's literally nothing wrong with her. Maybe it's the grave sin of being an animal character without grouping, which is arguably the best utility in the game, because you don't have to learn target priority, but honestly, I and probably many other people out there would prefer no grouping over anti-grouping. The controversial reaction, Overload, comes to mind. And as I write this script, I really feel like I've been ragging on Jean a lot, but don't get me wrong, she's a good character. It's just the 4-star supports drive a hard bargain. And people call Sayu a Jean clone, but it would be more accurate to say that about Bennett, as they have the almost exact same kit with a healing circle, a cleanse, a knock-up on larger enemies, etc. With the difference being Bennett is the best character in the game. So where does that leave Jean? Anyway guys, that's all for me. I want to thank you guys for watching, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.